So I haven't been able to finish the book yet, but I did hear you on the Black Mass Appeal podcast. You were discussing Lucian and his views about free speech, and you said that, in his words, hate speech should not be protected and wants that limited as much as possible. But both Malcolm and Lucian have been very public in stating that they don't think hate speech should be limited at all. I was curious about how that message could get so mixed to the point that it was the opposite of what they've actually said.
Huh. Well, so the quote that I used in my book about that, he did. So it was from Lucian. And he said in that quote, which was from a column he wrote, back in 2016 or even earlier, he was writing a column called Letters to a Satanist for like the Orlando Times. Anyway, so I took that quote from that column, and in that quote, he did say we should take care never to limit hate speech, but for the most pressing of reasons. I did not know that they were saying that they didn't want to limit it at all. I think what's going on there is Lucian and Malcolm are very concerned because a lot of Christians and churches and bishops and, especially church leaders and dominionists have been tagging us as hate speech, like since we were founded. And sometimes that designation works to silence us. So, for instance, very early on, TST was scheduled to do a Black Mass at the Harvard Cultural Center for Harvard students to see, as a kind of historical recreation, because the Black Mass has been historically like what people have always thought that Satanists were doing since the affair of the poisons, like in the 1600s. So, we were set to do that, and Harvard had said yes, and, we had it all reserved at the Cultural Club. And then the Bishop of Boston started making a stink, and there were protests. And so this bishop convinced Harvard that this was hate speech, that the Black Mass was hate speech, which it wasn't. Like, this is always the charge leveled at us, that anything we do, like even like cleaning up a highway, because we're Satanists, the fact of our very identification as Satanists is somehow pointed directly at them, at the churches, like we're doing it at them, which of course we're not. We're doing it for ourselves. We do blasphemy for ourselves to shake us free of that, Abrahamic programming that so many of us were subjected to. Like, blasphemy is very useful for that. But so anyway, the bishop convinced the president of Harvard to not allow us to do the Black Mass. And the reason given was because it was hate speech. So that's why they're so incredibly, against the label of hate speech, because they're worried that it can be used to silence, especially considering how much theocracy we have in government right now. The Supreme Court, right? The majority are Christians, and it would be very easy for them to legislate against us based on hate speech restrictions. So I think that's what's behind, them starting by saying that restriction should be limited to, I guess now they're saying there should be no restriction at all, because they're afraid that will be leveled against us with so much, there's so many politicians that are part of that dominionist effort. So that's my guess. I can't get into their head, but I've I've been taking the ordination course, and they do discuss that, the hate speech thing, and the fact that it's been leveled at us so much, and we're scared. They're scared that it's going to be used as a legal, silencer, basically, for us. So that's my take on it. I don't necessarily, it's hard. I understand where they're coming from, but I also don't believe hate speech should go unpunished, basically. I think there should be consequences. Obviously, there is consequences for a lot of speech, but not from the government, right? Like if a university can decide not to let somebody speak, and it's not a free speech issue because it's not the government. So, I don't personally think we should give platforms to hate speech, especially now when it's becoming such a problem with Christian nationalism. But, I'm not the one running TST. So that's my take on it.
If it's okay, just to follow up, who do you think should get to define hate speech?
Oh, that's an interesting question. See, that's the issue. I'm not sure. I think originally the definition of hate speech is speech that directly incites violence. So, the president and his cronies made a speech that to me seemed like it directly incited the violence at the Capitol. So I would define that as hate speech, but I'm not sure what body should get to define it. I guess I would normally say the courts, but the courts are filled with over 200 appointees that Trump made at the recommendation of the Federalist Society, which are all ultra-conservative judges. So I don't know. I guess I would say maybe the people in who they vote in, who then pick the judges, but that's a hard question. I'm curious to hear if anybody else has thoughts on that.
I think, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I know for me, I think that hate speech gets thrown around, unfortunately, when it's something that somebody else doesn't like to hear. Not discounting, the blatant calls to violence or discrimination, but yeah. How often do we see it thrown around casually as, you said this is dumb, that's hate speech. I think,
right,
people are going to define it the way that they're comfortable defining it, and I think that's where it gets so hard because some people don't think it's bad, some people do,
right.
So it is such a challenge to figure that out.
Yeah. So